It's a happy day when you go home and you think you've done something that's for the ages. Don't let any shit out, and you'll find at the end of the year you might have quite a few pieces of work that you can enter the awards. And you'll also have sold a lot of stuff, and your clients, I'm not actually sure whether your clients will still be with you because they don't mind doing shit. They don't mind letting any shit out, and they don't have the critical faculties that you have to determine what is shit and what isn't. I'm afraid. Means you can't send any of this podcast to any of your clients.
You're listening to the Genius Scouts podcast with Justin Oberman and Aaron Zakowski. Join us each week as we bring you exclusive conversations with the business leaders and innovators you need to know about, sharing the secrets that fuel their success and power their personal brands. Let's dive in.
So today we have a very special guest, Aaron. I don't know if he likes being called doctor, but Steve Harrison is a creative visionary, the founder of Brand Response Advertising, and the most awarded creative director in the Cannes Lion history.
For a brief period of time, I was the most awarded creative director in direct marketing for about 6 years, in the world, but nothing much more elaborate than that.
Okay. You could be humble. It's fine. Now, although Steve contends that his training as a historian and his doctoral thesis on the American Society in Cinema and Television made him unemployable, it all seemed to turn out all right in the end. And if you ask me, is probably responsible for his amazing career. His talent and dedication quickly propelled him through the ranks at Ogilvy, where he advanced to the position as head of copy in 1989 and was appointed European creative director by 1997. In 2001, he co-founded HPT Brand Response, and in so doing also founded a new type of advertising called Brand Response, which we will let him explain. And the agency was eventually, I believe, bought by Wunderman to become HTW, right? Harrison Trunton Wunderman. Beyond his agency work, Steve has made significant contributions to advertising and literature. He's the author of several essential books, including many of my personal favorites. So How to Write Better Copy, which was my first book on copywriting and still my favorite and go-to. How to Do Better Creative Work, again, my favorite book about creativity in advertising and really about advertising in general. And did a lot in order to, was kind of my go-to book to advance my career. Changing the World is the Only Fit Work for a Grown Man, which is a brilliant biography of Howard Gossage, Aaron. And most recently, Can't Sell, Won't Sell, which is a thought-provoking critique of the industry's shift away from commercial creativity. And most recently, so Can't Sell, Won't Sell, and the Howard Gossage Show. So with all these accolades, it's no wonder why Steve has been called the greatest direct marketing creative of his generation by Campaign magazine. But for me personally, Steve has been one of my greatest mentors, both through his books before we ever met, and fortunately, most recently, over Zoom several times. He is also partially responsible for the name of this podcast and our personal branding agency, which is called Genius Scouts, which, as I have mentioned more times than Aaron cares to hear, comes from the, let's just call it, extracurricular activities of Howard Gossage, and the ad legend that both Steve and I share an obsession over. As a former academic myself, I find his books and the way he thinks to be the most relatable and influential in shaping my views and philosophy on advertising, including his most recent controversial views about purpose-driven marketing and woke advertising, which I finally feel comfortable coming out as saying I 100% agree with. I think the world outside of advertising needs to know him better for many reasons, but particularly for his views on purpose-driven advertising, brand response, and lessons from Howard Gossage. And hopefully, he will give us some insights on how all of his experience and all of this knowledge can be applied to advertising's newest and latest obsession, which is personal branding. Steve, welcome to Genius Scouts. It's an absolute privilege to have you here with us today. We are not worthy, but we are internally grateful to have you here.
Well, that was it. I'm very humbled, flattered, and humbled. That was honestly the most generous introduction I've ever had not the pleasure, but that's ever been heaped upon me. I'm very grateful to you, and I hope I won't disappoint your listeners in the next hour or so.
Well, you haven't disappointed me yet in my life. Like I said, I truly mean it. I've never met somebody where just even in your latest book, The Howard Gossage Show, all of the stuff you put together from like Paul Feldwick and these are all books that I was reading too, and I was putting them together as well, probably based on your influence from reading your books before. And so when I read it in the Howard Gossage Show, I was like, oh, what a relief it feels to feel understood, or like I'm not the only one. But of course you articulate it much better than I have.
Well, you're quoting Howard there when he read McLuhan, I think it was. He said that once he read McLuhan, he think, thank God I'm not the only one who thinks like this.
Well, you should know that right before you, we had Andrew McLuhan on as a guest as well.
Did you? Wow.
The first Genius Scout was his grandfather. Yeah,
himself.
Is there anything you want to add to that introduction?
No, I would clarify that the Cannes Lion thing. It was I won more Cannes Lions in my discipline than any other creative director in the world from about 2001 to 2007. So in a brief period, we were the best shop in the world, without any doubt. I think HTW, and for a network agency like Wunderman as well to achieve such creative success, that was probably my proudest moment in agency life, to have achieved that with a dead-in-the-water network shop that Wunderman was when we took it over to the way the state it was in when Martin and I left it in about 2006, 7. So, but that's the only, I wouldn't disagree with any of the wonderful things I wouldn't question. I'm not sure I'd agree with them. But I wouldn't take any of them back. So thank you.
But there's something interesting in what you just said, and I was trying to explain this to Aaron. The most awarded, and you are essentially, right, or in Ogilvy, a direct response, creative and copywriter. But what you did is you brought the branding aspect into the direct response, right? This brand response advertising approach, and that's what made your campaigns more effective and win more awards and stuff like that. Is that generally it?
I got into this racket in the late 80s, and when I got involved in it, it's pretty analogous to the way that digital is now. That we were chasing people today we're chasing people around the internet shouting offers at them. When I got into this racket, we were standing at the letterbox shouting offers through the letterbox at them. And there was no real place for an idea in any of the work that was being produced, as there isn't now in a lot of the digital work that is chased, the direct digital work that's being produced. And so I got into direct marketing in the early 1990s, late 80s, 1990s, when I had some influence, that is. And we started putting ideas in our advertising, and we were lucky in that when I was putting my creative department together at Ogilvy, there was a recession, and we were for the first time getting people from advertising desperately looking for any kind of job, Justin. And I managed to recruit people from advertising. And I always found it was a lot easier to get advertising people to come up with ideas, which we could then turn into direct response work, than it was to get dyed-in-the-wool direct response people to come up with ideas. as I'm sure you'll appreciate that, why it was easier to do that. So it was, the principles of brand advertising, but always with the intention of getting some kind of response from people. And I've never understood why all advertising shouldn't really aim to do that. And then when we started HPT Brand Response in 1997, Martin, I, and Tim, our go-to-market was that there were still direct marketing agencies and still advertising agencies, and the ad agency would get the client to spend a hell of a lot of money coming up with a brand idea, and then they would spend a lot of money on direct marketing, completely destroying it. Kind of. So we thought that everything would start from a brand idea, and to greater and lesser degree would have either an overt call to action or a more subtle call to action. But it was everything that we did. There were always two ideas on the brief. The first was the brand idea, and then the secondary idea would be the idea for that particular communication. But we always had to reinforce or refresh the brand idea. That was the discipline that we worked under. And I still think it's a great idea. I still would argue that all advertising should be cognizant of what the brand idea is and should be respectful and try and, as I say, reinforce or refresh it in some way, whilst still achieving the tactical objective that communication has been set.
There's a lot of interesting things in what you said there. And first of all, I want to say that if anybody's really interested in how to do that, if we had more time on this podcast, I'd probably press you on some tips. But I believe in your book, How to Do Better Creative Work, is really where you lay that out pretty well.
Seven gives a good example of probably the best example my agency did. And that was a campaign that lasted over, God knows, 6 years for a financial services company. It's also probably one of the pieces of advertising that is most overtly influenced by Gossage as well. So if you look at those print ads,
which ads were that for the
M&G Investments?
Oh, the subway, they were actually like long form billboard ads, right?
Yeah, Mind the Gap, and kind of So we did a very that was probably the best work that I ever was involved in. I'm proudest of, I think.
Right, and
as you know, it's always hard, but yes, it was.
But there were some interesting things, semantic things that were going on there. Where you said you were able to bring in, you made a very semantic difference between direct response and advertising. You said advertising people and direct response people. I don't think people make that distinction so much anymore. So I just want to clarify for the audience what he meant was, I guess, would be people who are doing more of the big brand campaigns, right? And I guess what you would call performance marketers today. So, and that's the interesting thing that happened, right? Was the brand people sort of needed work and came in and worked for you, and were able to make this unique combination of things.
That as I say, when I started direct marketers, direct response people, I think that I remember being horrified by a chart that was showing me about the importance of the features of a piece of communication. And I seem to remember that the creative came forth after list, offer, timing, creative. I remember being appalled by that. And what we tried to do was to make sure that the creative was always the work was always the number one priority. But when I started in direct, it was, it was an ideas-free zone, a creative ideas-free zone, I'm afraid. And the brand advertising people were the ones who were the custodians of ideas, or the custodians of the brand, and the ones who generated the ideas. Nowadays, I think they call it creative agencies. In the UK, they call them the creative agencies, which is pretty damning of what you would say, I think, the performance agencies. So the performance agencies can't be creative, and the creative agencies can't perform. And we've gone back to that horrible above the line, below the line schism, which I always never respected,
It's amazing how you are a student of history, and it's amazing how almost Hegelian it is, this cycle of advertising, how it seems to keep moving in these in this loop, where you have 5-10 years maybe of a creative revolution of some kind, and then it goes back into performance and direct, and it just keeps circling in new ways.
And also to add to that, the salesmanship, showmanship dichotomy as well. Kind of every 20 years, we find that salesmanship comes to the fore. Then it's followed by showmanship. And I think we're entering the showmanship period again, I'm hoping. I can live with both. I like salesmanship.
Both, yeah. Well, brand response.
Again, you should be able, shouldn't you, Justin? They shouldn't exist in mutual exclusivity. The salesmanship should be, you should be able to be a showman and also present a good sales argument. And I think, kind of that's it.
Can I ask a question on that? Justin introduced me to the idea of, brand response a couple of years ago. For a bunch of years, I ran a direct response agency, and I always felt that something was missing with it. That they're just kind of like putting CTAs and offers in front of people never seemed to work, at least not long term. But at the same time, so many companies, especially earlier stage companies and smaller companies, they do have pressure that they do need to see results, dollars and cents revenue coming through more quickly. And then there's often that initial instinct, let's go straight to sales, let's go straight to direct response, cold call, cold emails, all those things. But at the same time, I think we all know, certainly all of us here on the call, recognize the long-term value of building that brand and all the benefits that come with it.
Yes.
With this middle ground, which to me is always so beautiful, like almost anything in the middle to me is usually the right path of brand response. Would that be that solution then to finding results quickly, but still needing to do something for the long term? Or is it just kind of put you in the medium time frame, I would say, towards getting results?
I would never do anything that, you've got to put it helps to put everything you've produced for a client on the wall every 3 months, and to say, is this a family? I think that for me is the test. Stick it all up on a wall every 3 months or every 6 months and go, does this look like it's come from the same place? And also, does this sound like it's come from the same place? And is this all moving in the direction of what we think the brand is about and the brand promise that we're making to people? And also, I mean, I got a good creative reputation, not by aiming to do great work. The watchword at the agency was never let any shit out. Don't try and do 7, 8 out of 10s, 9 out of 10s, and then be happy that some of the work is 2 out of 10. It doesn't really matter. So I think that if you take the 2 out of 10s and elevate them to 4 out of 10s, then the 4 out of 10s kind of almost by default you start doing 6 out of 10s, and the 6 out of 10s become 8s, and you may even be turning some what would stand by, usually be an 8 out of 10, become 10 out of 10. But I think you do that by refusing to ever let anything out that is substandard. So you don't do any 2 out of 10s. Have a sign up on the wall, never let any shit out.
But the inverse of that I think, totally agree. But the inverse of that also is that you don't need to be perfect. That you don't need to always be having a 10 out of 10.
No, you can't. I mean, for crying out loud, hey, kind of, Um, if you, it's a happy day when you go home and you think you've done something that's for the ages. Kind of, it's a happy month if you go home once a month thinking you've done one for the ages. But if you go home every day thinking that you've done a good job and you've done your best at that job, with that billing stuffer or that on digital display ad, you've done it better than other people could do it. You've beaten the pack. Then that, yeah, cool. Um, yeah, don't let any shit out, and you'll find at the end of the year you might have quite a few pieces of work that you can enter the awards. And you'll also have sold a lot of stuff, and your clients. I'm not actually sure whether your clients will still be with you because they don't mind doing shit. That's your big problem. They don't mind letting any shit out, and they don't have the critical faculties that you have to determine what is shit and what isn't. I'm afraid. Means you can't send any of this podcast to any of your clients, but no, that's my that the problem is that I never the person I was most interested in was always the prospect, and I didn't much care. The client's opinion of it was never of paramount importance to me.
That's a very Howard Gossage philosophy right there.
Yeah, it was, that was, and unfortunately, that's why so much shit work is out there, and Justin, because my whole shtick was that most good work is an exercise in problem solution, and most clients come to you saying, "Yeah, oh great, I love this problem solution dynamic thing. They're talking my language. An ad man who gets me, and then they say, do me an ad that solves my marketing problem." And you go, well, kind of, widget sales are down 5% quarter on quarter, do me an ad that sells more widgets. And they expect the ad that says, buy my widgets, the best just got better. Tomorrow's widgets today, that kind of, seeing is believing. Expect the unexpected. Ads that, with the big logo and the product. And you've got to explain to them that we're going to take your marketing problem and we're going to turn it over there and see if there's a customer problem there. And we'll try and if we can solve the customer's problem with your product, we can also solve your marketing problem. Kind of, but they want ads that say the best just got better. They want ads that say tomorrow's widgets today. They don't want something that sells the widgets to the customer. They think, what are you doing that for? I can't see myself in this advertising. And the reason why there's so much bad advertising, I think, is because agencies either are too dumb to realize their job is to actually do customer-focused advertising, or they're too cynical. And they know that actually if they're going to sell this in, then they've got to get the clients to nod on, so the client's going to buy, tomorrow's widgets today, or better still, the art of widgets. Clients love the art of widgets, kind of. So if ever, kind of.
That's why they also like AI so much too, because that's what AI gives them. It gives them the art of widgets.
It does. Yes, yeah. So,
sorry, go on.
No, I'm sorry.
I was going to say this is actually a good leeway into the can't sell, won't sell thing. But before we go into there, I do have a question that I was wondering about, which is this whole brand response thing. When you were at Ogilvy, you were at Ogilvy when Ogilvy was there, right? I mean,
I stayed as food with him, yeah.
Right, and worked with him, and it always just seemed to me that Ogilvy was also somewhat of a, well, from what I understand, reading the history, he oscillated a lot. Like he would be like a really big with his brother. What was it? His brother-in-law, right? Ross Reed, be all into it. Like, oh, it's all about direct response, and then he'd go and spend time with Rubicam, and realize, oh no, the brand part too. So it seemed like he also was a brand response guy. Did any of your influence come from him, or?
Um, I mean, no. I mean, as a direct marketer, I mean, he said that it's his secret. Direct mail was his secret weapon, and he was very enamored of my first boss called Drayton Bird.
Oh wow!
And Drayton was the executive creator. He was the man who rescued me from the library. Drayton. He said, "Do you want to be a writer? You don't look very happy." I said, "I'm not really." He said, "Do you want to be a writer?" And I said, "Yeah." He said, "I'll give you 6 months. If you're not making me any money, I'll fire you." So him and Ogilvy got on very well. And David didn't like the silk-hatted dilettantes who had got into advertising by then. He was always he was always about, he loved his research. He liked empirical evidence for everything. And I don't think David got ideas, not the way that advertising, David's version of an idea was the eye patch and the, and then they're not the classic now, the big creative idea that doesn't fit the definition of most advertising people of a big creative idea. They would call it a gimmick. Whereas what it actually gives you is a great idea of mental availability, and it's a fluid device, to use the modern terminology. So it was an idea, but it wasn't an idea in the Bernbackian sense of something that dramatized and demonstrated the proposition, It was a device, David. So David was conflicted, I think. And as he got older, became more cynical and more sales-oriented as opposed to the brand stuff. Although, of course, he was the man, I think, who said that customers build a brand like a bird builds its nest from the sticks and twigs it finds along the way. It's either him or Bert Bulmer who said that. I can't remember.
That's an interesting thing. I'm so tempted. I want to talk about the can't sell, won't sell stuff, but there's something else you said about Ogilvy. Because one of the things that we do at Genius Scouts, if you think the best way to describe what we are is we're kind of like an ad agency, but for people instead of for brands. Because right now, the personal branding thing, social media has allowed it to become easier to do, escalating it to new heights. Of course, the problem you have is like with Andy Warhol, if, it said everybody will be famous for 15 minutes, but what he didn't mention is that inflation of that 15 minutes decreases the amount of fame that everyone will have. But, and so the competition becomes fierce, but I always use, and so with Genius Scouts, what we do is we help build personal brands, right? Both by doing the branding part and believe it or not, the performance and direct response. We say that you need to do the organic stuff and take out the ads. And one of the examples I always give is Ogilvy. A lot of our clients, most of our clients are either in the entertainment space or agency owners. Right. And Ogilvy was kind of like the OG of the using a personal brand to sell work, right?
He was a pioneer of it. I mean, the last chapter of the Howard Gossage show is all about Howard's brilliant. I mean, his greatest creation was Howard Gossage, right? But at the back of my mind, I was thinking, I'm being a bit disingenuous here, because the guy who really nailed it was Ogilvy. I mean, walking up and down Madison Avenue in his kilt, he wasn't even Scottish, for crying out loud, and walking up and down Madison Avenue in his kilt. I mean, he freely admitted the only reason he wrote Confessions of an Advertising Man was to shift the spotlight onto it. It was a PR exercise, kind of. He was a showman. Was David, You know,
I think that's what Bernbach even called him, right? The showman.
I think so, with a hint of resentment, I think.
Right. Yeah. And I did make once a guide. I put it on LinkedIn. Whenever you talk about Ogilvy on LinkedIn, the posts always do very well. And I created Ogilvy's personal guide, the Ogilvy Guide to Personal Branding. And he basically outlines it in one of his books. And I did another one for P.T. Barnum. I'm going to do another one for Howard Gossage that's sort of based off of your, what you said. And how did Howard Gossage do it differently than Ogilvy? Is it just what they talked about? Like, are the fundamentals the same?
Well, let me see. I think Ogilvy was the template for Howard, because Ogilvy transcended advertising. He became a media figure, he became a public intellectual, and was probably one of the first ad men to do that. I don't think Raymond Rubicam, who was, I would say, was the precursor of the famous ad guy. I don't think Raymond Rubicam became a public intellectual, and I don't think Bernbach did. But I think Ogilvy, you could imagine Ogilvy on the Tonight Show,
I think it was on the Tonight Show.
Yeah, well,
Yeah.
that doesn't surprise me. Kind of Ogilvy courted fame, and when I say that about Howard, that when he had the Firehouse Salon, to the people who don't know, I'll give some background detail to that Howard would have parties at his agency, the Firehouse in San Francisco. And he would invite John Huston, for example, the Academy Award-winning director. He would invite John Steinbeck, the Nobel Prize-winning novelist. He would invite Nancy Mitford. He would invite Dr. Spock, the childcare guru, Buckminster Fuller. But he wouldn't invite advertising people. In all of the research that I've gone through, he didn't have any mates amongst the advertising community, apart from Carl Alley, and Ogilvy. I mean, he was close in with David, but he wouldn't invite him to the Firehouse, and neither would Ogilvy have gone.
Ogilvy didn't like to fly, right? He took turns. Yeah.
Well, he wouldn't play second fiddle. I think that. I mean, there were two huge egos. That's why that Howard and Carl Alley discussed merging their agencies.
Oh, and that I never knew. No.
Yeah, they discussed.
That would have been wild.
It was mooted. It was mooted that they'd become partners, and what a disaster that would have been. It would have been, I would have given that about as long as I would give Elon Musk and Donald Trump to stay together, which is not very
interesting.
So,
well, there's an interesting theme that you have here, which is something that we've never. We talk a lot about fame, and we talk about that, but what was interesting both with Ogilvy and with Gossage, and I would even say somewhat with P.T. Barnum, is that it seemed that the big theme here is they transcend the discipline. So it's like, okay, if you're in advertising and if you want to become a real personal brand, you have to become a personal brand, and it's not, and then it trickles down to the advertising, but it's not, you have to be almost more famous than the industry. Is that what you think?
That reminds me of in the Howard Gossage show, I quote the wonderful late lamented Sir Jeremy Bullmore, who in his 2001 paper Posh, Spice and Purcell spelled it out, that in order, fame is an unquantifiable value, and that's what we are aiming, that's what you're aiming to do for your clients, and that's what all advertising people should be aiming to create for their clients. And he said that the point about fame is that you must be known not just amongst the people who are in your target audience. And of course, that's what advertising, all advertisers aim to, home in upon their target audience. And, we need people who are drinkers of whiskey to know about Bushmills, and we need, but as Jeremy said, you've got to be known amongst people who are teetotalers. If you're selling Bushmills whiskey, you've got to be talked about by people who will never touch a drop in their lives. And this is what Howard did with Qantas, for example, the Australian airline. He got people talking about Qantas who would never fly in their lives. He got people who couldn't, anything more technical than a knife and fork talking about Scientific American. He got, as I say, teetotalers talking about Irish whiskey or Rainier beer or Paul Masson wines. And that is what fame is, that you must look beyond your natural constituency and be known amongst them. This is what he did for McLuhan. He took McLuhan away from academia. Marshall was quite happy to be, to be known on the academic circuit, but Howard got him on telly, and got people who really couldn't understand the fucking word that he said, which was 90% of the people quoting him, media is the message, kind of global.
Well, yeah. This is a fascinating angle. One I almost, Aaron, can't wait to explore even more.
Yeah, I'm thinking about it a lot as well. It's something Justin and I were just talking about a couple of days ago, the idea of, we always say to build your personal brand, you have to be, famous and relevant, right? And I've kind of argued, maybe small-mindedly, I would admit, that really all that matters is, within the industry of people that you're trying to influence. Most people, most CEOs, most, leaders within an industry, they don't have the charisma, they don't have the personality, so they're going to be famous to the world like the celebrities and such, right? But if they're just known by the people who need to know them in their business, well, then that's going to take them far, and they could be very, very successful with that. Yeah. And at the same time, Justin's arguing, yes, but if you could be really famous, to the broader world, that's going to be much more impactful. But, it makes sense what you're saying, that if you can, we think about, creating content for people on social media that helps them share their expertise and their ideas as it relates, broadly speaking, to the ways that they help their customers, right? But if you think about it in a broader sense, maybe how you're doing, and I think you're enlightening me a little bit, by becoming, putting out social media content that would just make them much more broadly known, maybe a couple levels of the onion broader, at least, within the industry, the type of people they work with. If you're trying to become known for marketing, well, maybe you start becoming known just for business, for business leadership, for business mindset, for all the things that just the broader world might want to know, and your reach can be so much bigger, and it'll trickle down still to impact your business. I think that's what you're saying. Is that right? It
is, yeah. The best. I always thought that Boguski would aim to be Alex Boguski of Crispin Porter. Yeah. I always thought Boguski would aim to transcend advertising. And I'm surprised that, he may have done in the States, but I'm surprised. I thought he'd end up, kind of running for, governor or seek political office,
I think he likes riding bikes too much.
Right.
He just likes to be outside and riding.
But in my own market, I would say, are you familiar with a chap called Rory Sutherland?
Of course, yeah. Yeah, Aaron, Rory Sutherland's the guy who talks about all the behavioral economics.
Yeah, sounds familiar.
Yeah. So what Rodders has done, he has found behavioral economics and sees that's application is much broader than simply nudging people to buy your product in the supermarket, Sure. And so it's got a much bigger application and a much bigger interest beyond that, but also aligned with a personality that Rory has. I've known Rodders. We go back to the creative department at Ogilvy and made the direct. So Rodders has not cultivated that personality. That is Rory. So, but it does help if you cultivate a personality, I think, and become interesting. kind of, and that is again is important, I think. But I think, I would use Rodders as a great example of somebody who has escaped the boundaries of the discipline that he originally kind of rescued him from unemployment. Kind of not rescued, but kind of gave him the job that gave him his initial fame as a copywriter. He was just too unruly to be a planner, but becoming a copywriter, he was a great writer, and he could have stuck to that knitting, but he was too big a personality, and I imagine too big an ambition for that.
Mm-hmm.
Steve, I know you've got limited time, and I want to be respectful, but I don't want to have the podcast to end.
We can do 2 sessions if you want. I'm enjoying this.
Okay, we definitely can.
I'm enjoying. I'm particularly enjoying talking to Justin because he is. He knows, apart from Dave Dye, who probably can trump you as far as creative work. His knowledge of ads.
Sure.
But I think you can see his ads and raise him on actually the legend and lore of advertising. So I defer to the two of you and Dave, and it's always nice being in Dave's company, and it's nice being in yours. So I'd be happy to do a second session if you want.
I would love to do a second session because I want, you said being interesting, and I want to dive into what makes you really interesting right now, which is the work that you're doing in Can't Sell, with that you launched with your book Can't Sell, Won't Sell. And based on the comment that you said before, which was that, being consumer focused, I don't want to say consumer, I shouldn't say that word, being people focused, being the people who are going to be buying, focusing on them. And I think that's one of the main catalysts here, right? In seeing what's going on. So for the next 10 minutes that I got to, thank you for saying that. I take a lot of pride in the history of advertising. I was just, given this book here. Look at this book. This is it. This is oh my goodness, it's falling apart. It's The History and Development of Advertising by Frank Presbury, published in 1929. And what's really interesting about that is 1929, that's the year when advertising kind of changed. Right. So it's like somebody from that period writing about the history of advertising up until that point. So you don't have, Hopkins is not mentioned in here, right? You don't have, he, in the beginning, it's like all about
they saw nothing like that.
British pub signs, and it really gets really heavy into detail about those things. The first bathtub ad, and really speaks very much to this argument that you make here, which is, I'm just going to say it's from your book where you say, it's 2020 and we gave up selling things long ago. We are instead on a mission to save the planet, alert its inhabitants to the evils of climate change, privilege, racism, cultural appropriation, and whatever might constitute a Me Too or LGBTQIA infraction. This is what advertising does now. Brands are no longer to be promoted on the fact that they clean your, whites whiter, but on their power to make your conscience cleaner. But then somewhere else you said to me that it's an important thing to remember that those things are good things. The purpose of advertising to increase the economy, to increase the profits of the person who's trying to sell goods so that he can employ more people, so that they can buy houses, so they can feed their family. And I remember you once saying to me on LinkedIn, he's like, it's almost like that would be advertising's purpose. So it's not that advertising doesn't have its own purpose in marketing is that. And books like this from the early days of advertising remind you of that, the boom that it caused.
Yeah.
Capitalism is a virtue.
Yeah.
Sorry.
I said that capitalism in itself, which marketing and advertising promotes, is a virtue in and of itself.
Well, yes, it is. I mean, I always used to say that every time you should remember that every time you sell something, every time something gets sold that you have advertised, somebody gets paid, right? So someone goes into a store and buys the thing that you've been advertising, that person gets paid, kind of who sells it. The shop person gets paid. Money goes in the till, they get paid that day. But it isn't just them who gets paid. It's the person who designed the thing that's just been bought, or who grew the thing that's just been bought, or the person who put it together. It's the person who stored it in the warehouse. It's the person who took it from the warehouse in the truck to the shop. They get paid as well. And the person who comes and cleans the shop an hour after that shop has been closed gets paid as well, simply because somebody bought something that you advertised. And for me, that's a good enough reason to get out of bed every day.
Yeah. Like you said, it's like it's the purpose.
Yeah.
It like that's purpose driven. So on the next podcast, I have a lot of questions around this, especially, we'll get to them. Well, I know you like to know the questions ahead of time, but I'll send them to you. But examples when a brand can do purpose driven advertising, you give some really good examples, I think, in the later version of your book. But so if we have a little bit more time, then going back to oh man, there's so many things without the pressure of that point. At some point, I want to have a side conversation with you about Nicholas Samstag.
Right. Good God.
Yeah.
Now, you tell me more about that, because I've got to tell you, when I was doing the curation of Alice Lowell's Gossage archive, there was a series of letters between Nick Samstag and Howard Gossage. And, you can please enlighten me. They were the most, of all of Howard's letters, he seemed to get on with Samstag better than anybody, and Samstag seemed to know him better than anybody. And then, please, can you enlighten me as to, do you know anything more about that relationship, Justin?
I can only surmise, in the sense that now I'm not going to be able to find the book, but there's 2 books by Nicholas Samstag, or 3, that are very Howard Gossage in tone and voice. And there's a great recording of Samstag talking to, was that a famous announcer? Hefner, not Hugh Hefner, the guy who had the Open Minds show, about his latest book, which was, I was not prepared. I told myself I wasn't going to talk about Nicholas Samstag.
Please. We can always edit. I'm interested.
Yeah. So he wrote a book called, no, I'm not going to find it, am I? Well, Nicholas Samstag worked with Edward Bernays.
All right. Did he?
And if you, and even had a chapter of his book, in one of his books. So Nicholas Samstag wrote 3 books that you should read. One of them is called Bamboozled, how the ad boys trick like brands or something like that, in which he's got 8 disillusions of advertising. Basically, he's like, I'm out of advertising now, so now I'm going to tell you why how the advertising people are kind of screwing you. But more importantly, how you actually enjoy that. And that's what you want. He wrote before that, he wrote this book, which I happen to have here, called Persuasion for Profit. And there is one part in here that when you get to it, where he talks about creativity. And if that looks a little bit familiar to you, where Howard Gossage is talking about the circle and the dots, there are tons of lines in both this book and the Bamboozled book that are Gossage thoughts, like about the ice selling to the ice cream, selling chocolate ice cream and sex. And it occurred to me that I think Howard Gossage was enamored by Nicholas Samstag and borrowed a lot from him, including, I would say, when you hear Nicholas Samstag speak,
right,
his tone and inflection, even. Nicholas Samstag spoke like this, like one of these old, and slowly and thoughtfully. And, they met, they met. And I think actually in that speech, in the interview, Nicholas Samstag refers to Gossage without mentioning his name, because Gossage says, oh, we met once. And then I talked about my son. And then in the interview, he's like, I just had lunch with a man who talked about his son. And I was like, oh, that's probably Howard Gossage. Like, it was just, and the other book that he wrote, which is just so Gossagey, is called The Uses of Ineptitude, or How Not to Want to Do Better. And the whole book is like literally about, there's tons of motivational books in the world, but there's no book that's ever been written for the person who is too ambitious and needs to learn how to. So it's like how not to want to do better with your soul, how not to want to do better in business, how not to want to do better. And he wrote this book, and he gives these very Gossage-like answers. Like, it's like, why do you do this? He's like, mostly because I'm bored.
Yeah.
I write because I'm bored, and so.
Who said that? Samstag said that.
Samstag said that, but like Howard could have said that too.
Well, because there's a letter from Nick Samstag to Gossage, and I've got it. Must be 18 months since I read it now. But he pulls the veil back on Gossage. He said all of this stuff is just to keep you entertained. Everything you've done. He said, I know you, Howard. He said, all of this stuff, the saving of the Grand Canyon, the this, that, and the other, is just to stop you from being bored. It's to keep you entertained, So, wow.
And there's another important aspect of personal branding, right? If it's boring for you, it's not going to work. You got to keep yourself entertained. I mean, and that's like where a little bit of P.T. Barnum would come in, I would say. That man had a lot of fun doing what he was doing. I would say that Ogilvy and Gossage, too, had a lot of fun in their job. But yeah, I will resend you the link of this of the interview with Samstag, and you'll hear it in his voice when he's just, and there's certain lines verbatim. It's not a question to me that Howard Gossage lifted them from Samstag, and just wrote them better and said them better than Samstag did. But that's where the tediophobes and Mammanoid, like that whole thing, comes from. And I find that interesting, right? Like, you have two people with more or less the same philosophy, more or less, of things, both with this sort of love-hate disdain for advertising and marketing and the industry. And one of them wrote poems in the New Yorker. Samstag wrote these really intellectual books, but never really reached a level of fame. I think his most famous book is actually a children's book called KK Comes Home. And then you have Howard Gossage, who also didn't necessarily reach so much of a level of fame, but at least more than Samstag, and whose name is becoming more famous today. Whereas,
if Howard hadn't died at 49, do you not think that if he'd had another 10 years, he could have become the public intellectual that I think he wanted to be? I mean, I think that was his intention. And it was just that we were cheated of that, really, I think, by leukemia,
Right.
This is fascinating stuff. But the fact that Howard I'm going back to David Ogilvy's view that customers build an image of a brand like a bird builds its nest from the sticks and straws it finds along the way. This is what Howard did to create Howard Look Gossage. That he took a bit of Samstag, he took a bit of McLuhan, he took a bit of God knows what,
Which is actually really interesting, because I'm going to have a little secret here about how we work at Genius Scouts. One of the things that we do when we first get a client is we actually have a bunch of AI agents that are programmed to give advice like a lot of these legendary people. And what we sort of try to do is we're like, okay, well, this person they run this type of agency, they think these types of things. And I sort of begin to, in my mind, associate them. So are they a little bit more of an Ogilvy? Are they a little bit like a Howard Gossage? Are they a little bit, combining this, that, and whatever? And we talk to these agents and we get advice for them in terms of, helping to build this person's brand to a certain degree. They don't do the writing for us. That's not how we roll, right. But they definitely help frame it. And I think that's that sort of twig approach. Like it's okay to do this, right? It's okay to be inspired by people and borrow ideas from people and stuff like that.
Kind of is a new combination of old elements, isn't it?
Right. Well, that's what creativity is. Steve, we're almost out of time, but before we wrap up, we have a quick rapid fire round for you. Just answer with the first thing that comes to mind. Right. Ready? Okay. Most underrated figure in advertising history.
Gracious. God, I'm not very rapid, am I?
Well, I'm surprised. I thought you would say Howard Gossage, but maybe he's not underappreciated anymore.
I don't think he is now. I mean, now as we, we know that he's. I think you, me, kind of a very sort of. I mean, I think people have got Howard now. I mean, not as many as should have, but he isn't the great unknown that you would that needs discovering. He's been discovered, hasn't he? Let me think. I mean, I wish. I'll think of something. I'll give you that one at the next.
Okay, yeah, no problem.
You can perhaps if you need to.
Yeah. One book everyone in advertising should read besides your
own. I would recommend anyone read Jeremy Bullmore. Behind the Scenes in Advertising was the first one, and then it was extended to more. If you got it, God bless you. More Bull. Yeah, that's it. The Wisest Man in Advertising. Well done. Yeah. Well done. Yeah.
I love that Aston Martin story.
Isn't that the greatest?
It's good. It's the same reason I bought my car. So it's just like, I was like, damn, okay. And mine's just a Toyota Celica, but okay. This is a long copy or short copy?
Just enough string to wrap the parcel.
Thank you. Most valuable lesson from your academic career?
Stamina trumps talent or intellect.
Is traditional advertising dead?
Probably no, it isn't.
No. Next time I'm going to ask you how we can bring brand response to digital direct response. That's a bigger question, but your favorite Gossage campaign?
I suppose it's got to be Fina, I think, just for and given the fact that Dave has found yet more executions, which I had no idea about. No idea. So there's probably about 20 ads now, more than 20 ads, yeah. And Dave, God bless him, has unearthed a few more. But I like Dudley as well, and you helped me find that.
Yep. Yeah.
You found Dudley for me. Thank you.
Yeah. Thank you.
You're margarine.
Yes. And by the way, there are more in Ramparts magazines. There are some ads of his that are definitely his ads.
Of course, yes.
For a different Ramparts thing. I think I told Dave Dye that. But okay, biggest misconception about direct marketing.
That it is necessarily dull and boring. Kind of that it's dull and boring and ideas free. It doesn't have to be.
Got it.
Certainly doesn't have to be.
And it says here one word to describe the future of advertising, but if you want to answer that in more than one word, just your thoughts about the future of advertising.
I don't know. I really don't know. I think I'd be giving hostages to fortune if I had an opinion, and I don't know. It's yeah.
And since we talked a lot about personal branding, I'm curious about what you think of your own personal brand. If you could put your own personal brand in a hashtag right now, hashtag, what would it be?
I've never thought of myself as having a personal brand. But I am fully cognizant that I have a personality which has got its good points, but is also pretty flawed. And they all, I'm afraid they all come out. I can't have a personal brand. Anyone who knows me say that I am the ideal person to play poker against. You know immediately what's happening,
Got it.
And it's a blessing and a curse.
It sounds like a great thing to me.
So hashtag bad poker player. I'm just kidding. Okay, well, Steve, this has been an absolute masterclass. And your insights, your stories, and your passion for advertising and for life in general have kind of really left us in awe. Thank you so much for sharing your brilliance with us today. We can't wait to have you back already to dive into everything that's going wrong with advertising today. And for our listeners who want to dive deeper into your work, where should they go?
Well, I should come to you, chaps, because I'm just terrible at self-publicizing. I don't have a website. There's nowhere for people to go to read my, ramblings or my books or whatever. So I don't know. Go to Amazon and buy my books.
Go to Amazon and buy Steve Harrison. Just search. People can also find you on LinkedIn, where you do write very great posts as well. The other thing I would say is if you go to Google and you put Steve Harrison and Dave Dye, you will find an interview that Dave Dye did with you.
Oh, yes.
And first of all, listen to the interview. But if you scroll down on that page, you will also see Steve's work, which we didn't dive that much into, but there are just some incredible creative mind blowers there. Like just to give somebody a taste right now, like I think it was an alarm company or security company, and you sent people an envelope that was ripped open, and there was just a simple line in there that said, what was it? If this is how you, the envelope arrived on their doorstep, and it had already been ripped open. So if they had to choose which of the other 4 pieces of mail they went to, they'd always go to the letter that had been opened, right? Been ripped open, in outrage and anger and whatever. And the letter just said, it was the overline to the letter said, if this is how it feels
when you think someone's been through your mail, imagine how you'd feel if they'd been through your house. If a stranger's been through your mail, imagine how you'd feel if he'd been through your house.
Brilliant.
So brilliant. And there's literally just idea and campaign after campaign of that there. So you can actually get a real taste of Steve's brilliance. So thank you so much, Steve. And we really look forward to having you back on to talk about.
I'll give you my very pretentious view on why direct mail is such a unique medium when we get back together.
Got it. I'm a big advocate of direct mail. Hardest thing to sell right now, but I am a big believer in it.
Couldn't be. It should be. Yeah, but anyway. So thank you, chaps. I'm going to go and get myself some tea and look forward to seeing you in a week's time.
All right. Thanks, Steve.
Good pleasure.
Thank you, Darren. Thank you, Justin. Always a pleasure.
Thanks for tuning in to the Genius Scouts podcast. Be sure to subscribe for more episodes, and if you're ready to take your personal brand to the next level, visit geniusscouts.com.